So, going to the zoo, always a fun experience, right? And everyone loves to check out certain animals. You got the elephants, which are the big animals, right? They're so cool. You look up and you're like, I'm small. And you got the birds that are flapping around. You got the monkeys, which are jumping from place to place in high-spirited action. And then you have the sloths, right? The sloths that just kind of slowly sit there, and they are always boring. Isn't that going to a zoo with the kids? They're so excited to see the monkeys, and they walk by the sloths, and they're just like, okay, when are they going to move? Like, what are they going to do, right? Yeah. And I think as we talk about the sluggard, or the sloth, one of the temptations is to think that, oh, this specimen of the sloth over there, how pitiful they are, how horrible this lazy person is. And we forget to see, in fact, some of those same characteristics of the heart are within us as well. That we too are tempted in the same ways, and the way to help them isn't to say, just stop being a sloth. Walter Hanger, in his book, Procrastination, his little tiny booklet about procrastination. And in there he says his laziness was found this way. His personal motto was, pressure makes diamonds. He says, when I was in college, I first began to recognize this pattern. I started most of my papers the night before they were due, and I usually got A's. My friends all teased me about it, but I defended myself with the old saying of Parkinson's Law. Work expands to fill time available for its completion. That phrase, work fills to fill the time available. Why spend a week on a paper if I could spend a night and still get an A? He goes on to explain how this started to become less and less feasible as he had a wife, health issues, and children, and seminary, and life, and slowly it started to eat away at him and other people. And we'll see as he goes on, where we'll go today, is the fact that even this busyness, that he was getting stuff done, and yet his procrastination was a result of him being a sluggard, or him being lazy. One of the greatest lies of the sluggard is that they don't get anything done. And so people seem to think, oh, as long as I'm getting stuff done, I'm okay. So if you have your notes there, you can see where we're going. We're going to look at how the Bible, how Proverbs, and the Bible in general describes a lazy person, what is the result of their laziness, why they're lazy, and ultimately how the gospel helps a lazy person, whether it's ourselves or someone else. So to get us started, let's describe a sluggard, a person. What is the description that you might think of when you hear of someone being a sluggard or lazy? What do they do?
He acts like me.
Myself!
Yeah, I forgot this is what the lesson was going to be on, and I was going to not be here.
Yeah, I felt that too. Really, do I have to talk about this? So what are the kind of lazy things that we're tempted to do?
Put things off.
Put things off? Yeah, especially if it's something hard, right?
Yeah, and do things we like.
Yeah.
And then we think we're working hard at this, and that other thing is down there.
Yeah. What was that? Roll over in bed, hit the snooze button again.
I want stuff to clean me up.
Yeah.
Clean it, yes.
Yeah. My poor friend who literally had to put her alarm clock across the room so that she would get out of bed to shut it off.
I had this idea that I would have a trail of alarm clocks that were all 10 seconds off from my bedroom to the bathroom, right? And I did it like once, it was like maybe 2 or 3 alarm clocks, and one, and then another one goes off like down the hall, and then the last one in the bathroom. And you would just walk back.
You can buy these little things that are puzzles, and like the alarm clock goes off, and it literally shoots the puzzle up into the air. And so you have to pick up the pieces and then figure out how to put it back together on top of the puzzle before the alarm goes off.
In the Army, there's two classes when there's work to be done. You had the sandbaggers and the shammers. The sandbaggers are the one who would, okay, they got caught, so they got to do the work. and just work really slow.
Yeah.
And, take cigarette breaks every, 10 minutes.
A lot of breaks.
Yeah, the shammers were the ones who could, get out of it.
Yeah.
Just somehow weasel their way out of whatever that detail was. So, experts. Hardworking guys in a lot of other contexts like war, but, when there's no war, sandbagging and shamming. Just all day trying to avoid the word. Or just, you have to do it, just sandbag it all day. Terrible.
When I was in high school, I used to actually sleep in the bathtub. My mom would make me wake up in the morning. I would actually take a blanket and just sleep in it until time to go to school.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't get up.
Just
I think I got like 3 or 5 referrals.
Really? You just wouldn't get to school? I see a theme here with bed, which is actually in the Bible. It's true.
One thing we did in high school was, like a bunch of our friends would get together and we would make our assignments group assignments. So each person would do like a math problem and then we just get together before class and, teach each other. Share notes so that we only had to do like 1 or 2 problems.
Might not be the focus of what the teacher wanted, but hey.
It sounds a little bit like truth or consequences or something.
Yeah. So let's look at some of the descriptions Proverbs gives of the sluggard. We have a bunch of different passages, so I'm going to ask if different people can read them. But the first descriptor, I think the summary statement you can make of the sluggard is that he does not begin things. He doesn't get things started. He does not begin things ever. So you can write these down. If someone wouldn't mind doing for me Proverbs 14:23. When you got that? And then can someone else get Proverbs 20, verse 4? Anyone want to volunteer? Jerry's got that. And then Proverbs 20, verse 13. Jerry got that?
14:22 or 3.
14:23. I'll restate them.
In old labor,
Yeah, go ahead.
in old labor there is profit, but idle chatter leads only to poverty.
Okay. So what's going on there? What is the path that leads to poverty here?
Talk and no do.
Talk and no do. Yeah. So this person who talks a big game, says all the plans that they're going to have for the world and for their life, and it never gets started, right? You think of the person who talks big about how they're going to start this great group and make it rich, but they never actually even get the plans off the ground. Or Proverbs 20, verse 4.
The sluggard does not plow in the autumn. He will seek and harvest and have nothing.
So what's going on there, Yuri?
He's not doing the work to get his crops.
Yeah.
He'll have no food.
It's like to be able to harvest at harvest time, you must first plant months ahead of time, right? You got to, especially being a farmer is hard because you have to constantly be thinking ahead. And if you don't do a good job planning, it's going to come to the time and there'll be nothing there. So you can almost put the motto of the sluggard is never do today what can be put off till tomorrow. Like that's the motto. Never do today what you can't just put off till tomorrow. And that ends badly. Jared, if you read 20 verse 13.
Love not sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes, and you will have plenty of bread.
So he's not talking about sleep being a bad thing, because in fact, we do need sleep. We'll get back to this. Rest is a good thing. In fact, sleep is a humbling thing that reminds us that we are dependent creatures and need to rest. But so if sleep isn't bad, Jared, what's wrong there? What's the problem he's talking about?
Loving it, like it being like, just love this.
Yeah.
Do anything else.
Yeah.
That's not
The refusal to get up and hit my alarm clock over and over again. If you want, you can turn there or just listen to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs 6, verse 10 and 11. We talked about this previously, so I'm not going to, for those of you who were here, I'm not going to hash into it all over again, but it says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. Saying instead, you're supposed to be like the ant who works hard, is industrious, doesn't need anyone to tell him what to do, but the sluggard just wraps themselves just a little bit longer. And we talked about how this is a very subtle thing. This isn't like a huge, big, like they are choosing to go after sin in their life and refusing to do anything right, and they're going around with the wrong crowd. This warning in Proverbs chapter 6 is just don't give in the little areas of life. If you constantly give in the little areas of life, it will add up to the bigger ones. So, first marker, he does not begin things, most distinguished by not getting up in the morning. Secondly, he will not finish things. The second area, the second defining mark of the sluggard is he does not finish things. He does not get things done. So if I need someone else to read Proverbs 12:27. Victor, and then Mike, can you get Proverbs 19:24? Victor.
A lazy man does not roast his prey, but precious possession.
Okay, so you get the lazy man. What is he not doing? Yeah. So prey is the food that he catches. So you go ahead and catch it. So hunters, if you hunt something and you just let it sit there, what's going to happen to it? It's going to rot. So it's giving a description here. Is here this guy, he makes all the effort of catching an animal, gets the carcass out, and then he just doesn't cook it, and it becomes worthless. Or Proverbs 19:24.
The sluggard buries his hand in a dish and will not even bring it up to his mouth.
Yeah. So what's going on there?
I think it's a degree of laziness that even, simply getting food to eat is too difficult.
Yeah. And of course, these are humorous portrayals. This is a teaching lesson. There is some truth to that. You can think of it. It might be me saying oh man, he's so lazy. He just never gets out of his chair. He's going to just get to 800 pounds because he's in his bed. And in fact, there are real people like that, which is kind of scary. But most of the time, it's just kind of a funny statement that they start something and don't even take the energy to finish it. It's left hanging. Never completion. So he does not start things, he does not finish things, and third, he will not face things. He will not face things that are out there. Proverbs 22:13. Someone read that for me? 22:13.
The sluggard says, "There's a lion outside. I shall be killed in the streets."
So what's going on there? What is he worried about?
He's just making excuses not to even go outside and face the day.
Yeah. There's if I go out there, and it's not even as I'm walking. He doesn't say on the roads here, because if the word was on the roads, there are mountain paths where there's danger of lions attacking you. Here the word streets is the idea of city streets. This isn't out in the middle. This is in the middle of the city, which is very unusual and rare. He is making an excuse I can't get to life because if I have to face the day, then there will be a lion there. It's pretty laughable, in fact. Or Proverbs 24:30 through 34 says, "I passed by the field of the sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and I considered it, and I received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber, and a want like an armed man. So what is he doing wrong here? What is the wise man noticing is wrong about this field? That the vineyard is overgrown with thorns. Is that a good thing for a garden? No. Okay, how do you get rid of thorns? You cut them and you pull them. Yeah. Nettles are a type of weed. Think of it like those foxtails that you walk along and things get stuck in your clothing. That's the kind of thing that they are. It's a weed of some kind. Stone walls are broken down. How do you fix a stone wall? Yeah. Is this an image of a life in order or a life unmanaged? Disorder. Now, we can imagine the same thing, right? If you go by someone's desk or house and everything is thrown around and there's a huge mess that is there, it could be that they just had a bad week. But here is a description of not just one bad week's worth of problems, but this is upending and continual disregard and negligence, that everything is falling apart. And so the result will be poverty. Because does a vineyard grow well if there are broken walls and thorns and thistles everywhere? Weeds? Yeah, it destroys your livelihood. In the same way, it's hard for a guy to work. His life is severely disorganized and thrown about. It's hard for a homemaker to take care of her home if the home is a disaster and doesn't know where anything is. There's all these confusion parts. Yes, Andy?
Well, I just had a question
Yes.
about how the sluggard will not face things in Proverbs 22:13. Could you also say that not just like facing the day, but could that also apply to like say you need to have like a conversation with someone, or like I don't know, like certain things where you're like, oh, I have to go talk to this person about this, and I know it's going to be hard, so I want to keep like avoiding them or putting it off. Could you classify that person as a sluggard too, like under this?
Yeah.
That he's not, like, he knows what he should do, but he's not doing it.
Avoiding the work of his responsibility.
Yeah. That is believing any kind of excuse. And especially when you know it's an excuse. Which I think takes us to our last mark of the sluggard, is that he can be busy. He can be very busy. And I think this connects very with what you're saying, Andy, is someone can say, I have to do this, but I'm going to be busy doing other things instead so I can avoid doing the one thing I actually have to do, which could be talking with someone or getting the job done. Hold your finger in Proverbs and let's look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. New Testament, later Paul's epistles.
1 Thessalonians.
2 Thessalonians, I'm sorry, I was looking that way, that's not right. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 11. Right after 1 Thessalonians. If you get to Timothy's, you've gone too far. It's all the T's together.
I couldn't.
Yeah, that's okay. 11 and 12, you can read that. Somebody read, thank you.
For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy. But I'm sorry. Let me start over.
That's okay.
For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living.
So he uses that word there, right? It's kind of the same thing, idleness, laziness, passivity. And then he uses this word busy bodies. What is a busybody?
Somebody who's like always into stuff, that they they don't actually like do anything productive or like bring help to a situation, but they just kind of like want to have their hands in everything.
That's a good definition.
Other people's business.
Yeah.
And they want to know what's all about your business.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too.
What's that?
That's what I was thinking too, sorry.
It's interesting, the actual Greek word is a compound word, which means it's two other Greek words put together. And it basically is the word for working and the word for being around. So it's a work-arounder. Like that is the definition of a busybody. Someone who is dancing around, working, except for the thing that they should be doing. Or they can be someone we use the term as someone who's, dancing around in everyone else's business rather than their own.
Do you have a Greek word? I like to look those up.
I did not write it down. I can't remember off the. I can look it up for you in a little bit. If you'd like.
Saying it doesn't involve always other people's
Yeah.
things. It could just be just without getting into other people's business.
Yeah, he's going to say it's like they are walking in idleness. They're not doing what they should be doing, but they are involved in all kinds of things. See, someone who is a sluggard isn't doing nothing. There's someone who does everything except the thing that needs to be done. One writer says that he does just enough to get things done so he can get back to enjoying his comforts. Duties are what he performs, but comforts is what he craves. Yeah. It's stuck in me too. See, Derek Kidner notices this. Commentator Derek Kidner said, the wise man, he says, the wise man knows the sluggard is no freak, but as often as not, he's an ordinary man who has made too many excuses, too many refusals, and too many postponements. It has all been imperceptible and pleasant as falling asleep. This is all of us.
Yeah.
This is not like, oh, that crazy sluggard over there, how could it be, his life is ruined because of, his laziness. Like, this is all of us. So then, we must ask the question, where will the sluggard end up? Whether it's our own lives or someone else, what is the result? So we have the sluggard's development, where their path takes them. And we see first that they hurt themselves. A sluggard hurts themselves. Got a couple passages here. Proverbs 19:15. Someone get that for me? Okay. And then Proverbs 15:19. Just to mess with you guys. 19:15, 15:19. Someone got that handy? 15:19. And then let's do Proverbs 20, verse 4 again. We did read that before. Let's read this again. Jerry, can you give 20, verse 4 again?
Yeah.
And then 21, verse 17. Can someone get that? Alan, you got that for me? Thank you. We'll come back to these again. You didn't get all of them. The first one was Proverbs 21:17. Yeah. We'll go through them again. Yeah. All right, 19:15.
Slothfulness casts into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger.
So how do they hurt themselves, according to this?
By sleeping.
Well,
Hunger.
yeah, it brings them into sleep. It brings them into sleep, so they don't get things done.
Hunger.
Yeah. And this isn't like, just like I'm hungry because I haven't had anything in a couple hours. I better go to the kitchen, right? Like, what kind of hunger is this?
This is like famine.
Famine. You're not eating anything. You have no money to buy food. Hunger. Proverbs 15:19. Do I have that? 15:19? Oh, Andy.
The way of the sluggard is like a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a level highway.
So his path is like a hedge of thorns. What kind of picture does that give, Andy? What happens if you try and walk through a hedge of thorns?
Painful.
Yeah. What do they do to you?
It hurts you.
They poke you, just like a nice little light patch. Like,
Stick any of those on the side.
yeah, exactly. This is describing a great challenge. Like just look at a sluggard try and deal with monthly bills as they add up more and more in his life, and trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to pay this? How am I going to pay that? Or you know what, I've forgotten to pay this bill over and over again, and now the interest has grown greater and greater, and it's like as he tries to walk through life, it stabs. And even worse, if that person then goes ahead and gets married, has kids, and brings the whole family in with them. Proverbs 20, verse 4. Can you read that again?
Yes. The sluggard does not plow in the autumn, he will seek at harvest and have nothing.
Okay, so the second part of the verse. Now, what is he doing this time around?
He's looking to harvest what he didn't plant.
Yeah.
So he's got
What's crazy about that too is here he's obviously looking. So either he's a fool who thinks that he doesn't do any work and he'll get harvest still, or he planted late and he thought that somehow it would still work out. But here he goes and arrives at his field ready to bring in his crops to go and sell and to eat, and what's there? Nothing. And then Proverbs 21, verse 17. Alan?
Whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich.
Mm-hmm. So what's happening there? How does he hurt himself?
Pleasure and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
He's not working.
He's not working. He loves pleasure and ends in his poverty. Pastor Derek J. Brown says, "Many times I have neglected important responsibilities to watch television or surf the internet while resisting schoolwork or procrastinating in the face of difficult projects. And I must confess that while I succumb to the lull of passivity and indolence, I am afterwards never satisfied. The sweet promise of pleasure that laziness offers always turns to gravel in my mouth." That's a great phrase. That sweet pleasure that laziness offers always turns to gravel in our mouths. It hurts us. And secondly, laziness hurts others. Proverbs 10, verse 26. Can someone get that? Ed, thank you. And then Proverbs 18, verse 9. All right, Mike's got that one. Ed, Proverbs 10, verse 26.
Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him.
Yeah. Okay, so what's going on there? What is the description there? What happens when you have smoke in your eyes? Hurts? Yeah. Yeah. And has everyone tried to have gotten vinegar in their mouth?
I did.
Yes.
About 4 years older,
Yeah.
younger, 3.5.
What does it taste like?
Terrible.
Terrible.
Delicious on fish and chips.
Yeah. Put it with the right stuff.
I like it.
With salt.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Don't ruin the inspired illustration here.
You had
We're doing pure vinegar on your teeth.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Oh. To this
So
day,
what-
they send vinegar.
Yeah. So what's happened? What is there? So someone gives this idea of someone sends a sluggard out to do a task, whether it's a boss or a parent or a friend, and they are lazy and slow. They don't begin the project. They don't end the project. They don't face what needs to be done. They do everything else. And what is the result of the person who sent them? They regret it.
They didn't get done.
They didn't get done. They're pained. And then Proverbs 18, verse 9. Mike.
Whoever is slack in his work is a brother to him who destroys.
Yeah. So again, his parallelism, he's slack in his work. He doesn't get his work done. What is he connected with?
Someone who is a destroyer.
Yeah, he's a destroyer. It's interesting. Social scientist has got this phrase, really. A social scientist named Charles Murray identifies what he calls the new lower class. Pleasant, inoffensive folks who consume more than they produce. They break no laws, they break no windows, but by not contributing, they are destroying. A society can absorb the underproduction of a few people, but when that number reaches into millions, the consequences are high for everyone.
You're talking about welfare?
He is hinting at that, is he not?
It's talking about.
Our students' Bible study this morning, we had like a 30-minute conversation on if welfare is biblical.
Yeah, and next week, we're going to talk about the poor, so we'll get back into some of that for sure, and see what the Bible says and some of those things. But this is just a proverbial truth, right? If everyone does not work, what is going to happen to the society?
Collapse.
And eventually,
Math can't go.
yeah, the math can't work.
It's already like here in California.
We are experiencing some of those problems as our infrastructure breaks down and we don't have money and we have to go to the federal government to. For some reason, we say we don't owe them anything, we don't have to listen to them, but then they have to give us money. California's weird.
Pure communism doesn't
Yeah.
last for that reason.
And it never has. And in fact, there's never been pure communism because there's always the people on the top.
Self-destruct.
Yeah, they suck it up.
Well, and our country makes it really easy to be a sluggard because, as we were discussing in Bible study this morning, it almost pays more to be unemployed and get unemployment and food stamps and everything else than flip burgers at McDonald's or something like that.
And so God's truth remains. If that poverty is the result of being lazy, sluggard, not working when they can, it will hurt them and it will hurt others. It will hurt the society in the end. And the third consequence ultimately is it ends up angering God. Especially being spiritually lazy. A spiritual sluggard. Jesus tells the parable of Matthew 25, verse 26 and 27. He's just talked about these servants with the different talents. And he has the last servant, right? Who says, I took your talent and I was afraid of you. And so I buried it in the ground. So you just listen to this. Matthew 25, 26, 27 says, his master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. Lazy servant. You knew that I reaped where I have not sown, and gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. God gives us stewardship. J.C. Ryle, in his book Thoughts for Young Men, says, it is not that doing nothing is of itself so wicked. It is the opportunity it affords to evil and empty thoughts. It is the wide door it opens for Satan to throw in the seeds of bad things, which is what is mainly to be feared. Idleness, laziness, avoiding the thing that must be done gives a door wide open for Satan to throw his seeds into our lives. Okay, so we got this description of the sluggard. We have the very scary consequence of the sluggard, but then we have to ask this question. Why? Why are they a sluggard? And society gives all kinds of reasons. Bad parents, which can be an impact. There can be, cultural ramifications. And like I said, especially when it comes to the poor, we're going to look at the Proverbs about the poor next week. But what Proverbs teaches us is that the cause of someone being a sluggard is a desire. They want something. The Bible always tells us it is about our heart, and we do what we do because we want what we want. So Proverbs 4:23, of course, says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. 4:23. From our heart flows all of life. And so, to address the sluggard in ourselves or in others, we must address the heart. Let's see some of this. Proverbs 13, verse 4. Someone got that for me? Jared, was that in? You can't wave your hand. Proverbs, okay. Lynn's got 13, verse 4. Can I get someone else to get 12, verse 11? Okay. And then Proverbs 21, 25 and 26. Andy? Thank you.
The soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich.
So you see, the soul of the sluggard is craving. He wants something.
He's never getting it.
He's not getting it though. Proverbs 12, verse 11.
Whoever works his hand will have plenty of bread, and he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense.
So what does the person lack sense? What is he pursuing?
Worthless.
Something worthless. But he's going after something, right? And Proverbs 21, 25 and 26.
The desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hands refuse to labor.
Keep going.
Sorry, I was writing your page.
That's okay.
All day long he craves and craves, but the righteous gives and does not hold back.
So the sluggard has a desire which kills him. And how is he compared different from the righteous? What does he do and what does the righteous person do, Andy?
Well, the righteous really likes to give and doesn't hold back. And the sluggard, he just kind of gathers, like he wants and wants, but he gathers, he like hoards his things almost and like gathers and is like afraid to give because then maybe he won't have, whereas the righteous gives and trusts God to provide and wants to be generous with his things.
Yeah, there's some part. The lazy person is always a taker. The righteous person is a giver. See, we have to remember this truth, that whenever someone is in any kind of sin or unwise position in this life, there is something around their neck. Something saying, stop, act, indulge, submit. 2 Peter 2 verse 19 says, whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. Sluggering is a form of enslavement. Paul Maxwell at Desiring God, the website, says, laziness is not the reclusive passivity it pretends to be. It is an active obedience to someone, to something other than Jesus Christ. The Lord of the Sabbath offers freedom. Laziness is enslavement to something else. So thinking back over the passages that we read, or even just in general, when we are being lazy, sluggerish, what are the things that we want more than we want to serve God and get the tasks done? That makes sense? Comforts? Yep. Yeah.
Our own happiness, suppose.
Yeah. Material things. And you brought up a great point that the person who wants to hold on to stuff doesn't want to give it away because they don't want to trust God, they don't want to trust what they have.
That's what makes people sin.
Yeah. Sometimes it's this phrase of like, I deserve this, right? I've worked hard, I deserve a break. Even if it was only 10 minutes, like I deserve a break right now. Think about like the man who worries about the lion in the street, right? What does he really want? Why is he saying there's a lion in the street?
He wants to stay in and just relax.
Yeah. Or perhaps,
He's making himself fearful to maybe self-deceive himself.
yeah. Perhaps he's trying to avoid a conflict. He's like, oh well, yeah. You know, this person is so scary, I don't want to face them, so a lion seems better to believe in.
And sometimes we want to feel good and not like we don't like the feeling of being stretched or tired and stuff. And so we think we need things, but if God is taking them from us, then we don't like that feeling. And
So, and here's the truth. Sometimes we can be foolish into thinking that the sluggard is just, especially someone who's really lazy. You know, we're all lazy in some degree. Then we look at someone else, we're like, oh, you're so lazy. You're just worthless. Why can't you just do better? What is wrong with you? And sometimes we bash the person down and we think lowly of them. But being a sluggard is not actually someone who is worthless. A sluggard is someone who is a steward of gifts from God that he is not using. Think about that. God gives to everyone. He gives rain to the just and the unjust. He gives gifts to the righteous and the wicked. He gives them gifts to be used. And a sluggard is merely one who is not being a good steward of them. But he has them. He has these resources. He has these things to be used. He's just not using them. With God, we have purpose and we have a point, and we have to refocus back onto that, rather than just fueling the person's already sinful desires. Or maybe even, sometimes the desire itself isn't sinful, but it's overinflated. Like, comfort's good, but when comfort becomes more important than loving God and loving others, it becomes bad.
But self-control is also part
Exactly.
of that, because it's like discipline and self-control.
Yeah. So, fourth part, we talked about the description of the sluggard, the path, the downgrading sluggard, we have the diagnosis, and then fourth, we have the sluggard's deliverance. The sluggard's deliverance. How do we deal with the sluggard in our hearts and outside? And first, if I may say, here's what we don't do. We don't just come to the sluggard's rescue. Gotta be careful with this. Now, because Proverbs 16:26, I'll read this. Proverbs 16:26 says, "The worker's appetite works for him. His mouth urges him on." Okay, that a worker's appetite makes him move forward. But what happens if you feed the worker without him working?
He doesn't think he has to work.
He doesn't think he has to work.
You fill his appetite.
He feels appetite, so he's not driven forward.
And he can't feel very good about himself.
Yeah. Well, because again, that's part of the God has designed work as being a good thing. And again, let me caveat that with saying we will see, especially next week, the fact that there is a good place for helping someone relieve suffering and coming in to rescue them in time of need. But that is not someone who is being a sluggard and needs actually help developing themselves. Different categories. But 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10. Maybe you quoted earlier. If someone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat. He's not willing to work, he is not to eat. That's different from someone who cannot work or is trying to. But God disciplines sluggards by allowing them to experience the consequences of their folly with the desire they will learn from that.
So what do you say to somebody who is always asking you to do all these little things and can't ever do anything for themselves, and then you say, don't just come to Sluggard's rescue? So
Yeah.
what do you say?
Yeah.
I can't help you?
I'd say with every situation, there requires wisdom. And so we want to be careful making blanket statements. But there is something of saying, especially when it comes to a first request, always be willing to give. We consider others more important than ourselves. We are like Jesus, who want to serve and not be served. But when it becomes evident that they are acting as a sluggard, we do not want them to continue on the path of being a sluggard, because that will end in their disaster. And so we say, here's what I can do for you. I can't do anymore. Can I help you maybe be able to get here? Is there a path I can help lead you down to walk away from sluggishness? Which, let me get there. Because it's interesting, because even in the Old Testament, charity was often given to the deserving poor, like Ruth, who had to work in the fields picking. There was an expectation, you were to give and help those. But there were some ways where they were expected to do work as well. Now let me get another do not. Because we can't make an idol out of work either.
That also, when you see people constantly that they're wanting,
Yeah.
and an expectation of something that's deserved that they're not willing to give, and that becomes very obvious.
Yeah.
They're not willing to give anything, emotionally, mentally, or in any way.
And it ends up destroying them.
Yes.
You show the word do not.
Yeah, I would rather do not.
Shouldn't work without a basic plan.
Mm-hmm. Don't work without some of a plan.
Yeah.
Make sure that there's a path.
Simple, but
Yeah.
get them started.
Yeah. And that's one of the ways to help them is to walk through and say, here's a path to get out of this sluggishness. Yeah. But again, we cannot say, okay, here you have this idol of comfort. Let me give you the idol of work instead. And if you will just do work, then your life will be great, and you will be successful, and you'll have everything you need, and you will take care of yourself. Because that's not always true. Now, that's why Proverbs paints this picture that if you work hard, you will get results in life, and you will be successful. But Proverbs is only one side of the coin when it comes to wisdom literature. The other side is the book of Ecclesiastes, which comes right afterwards. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2 and 4, he says, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher, "vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil which he toils under the sun? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. You work hard, you pour all your life into it, and guess what? The world moves on, and you've done nothing." Or chapter 4, verses 4 and 6, says, "I saw that all the toil and all the skill in work comes from man's envy of his neighbor. This is also vanity and striving after wind. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after the wind." You see, on the flip side, you have this issue because some people are like, I want to keep up with the Joneses. I'm going to work really hard to have everything I want in life. And he's like, that's not worth it in the end. You work yourself to death, and what do you have? A bunch of stuff that you can't take with you. Or even that in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, he says, you leave it to your kids, and they turn out to be fools and waste all your money.
Or you turn them into sluggards.
Or you turn them into sluggards. Exactly. Yeah. So they're...
Your blood is full of it. About the week, you see mom who's 65, and the kid is 40. With long hair, and ugly clothes, and dirty. He's obviously living in the basement. She had a basement.
Children.
And just the warning it has when it comes to addressing the sluggard is we can give someone the desire for wealth that's just as destructive as the desire for comfort and laziness.
The workaholism in itself is a thing that looks good on the outside.
Yeah.
But the other side to their life could be totally bad, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And many times those people think, well, look what I've done, look how hard I'm working and what I've done, but what's the other part?
Yeah, it doesn't actually, it is not a life that honors God.
No.
It's ultimately what we want. Because here's the thing, is we can address issues. We can get someone working hard. You can give them a task list. You can give them responsibilities. You can give them a firm kick in the bottom and get them moving. And it might last a little while. And move a little, not a lot. We can do some behavioral modification, but we do not make people like the humans they're supposed to be, like Jesus Christ. To do that requires the heart. Even, again, we said Proverbs 16:26, a worker's appetite works for him. You can put something in front of him, and as a society, we need that. But we have to help someone work from a position of pleasure of God rather than trying to work to make God happy. See, it's the gospel-centered man who wakes up in the morning and says, I have the privilege of serving God today. The legalistic man wakes up and says, I gotta serve God today or he's going to be angry with me. I gotta get my task list done or my life is going to fall apart. The gospel man says, God has given me everything. How can I not work for him today? And especially if he knows the Lord, we have to kind of remove some of the objections, right? Because one of the big issues in our own hearts and in working with other people is the lying in the streets, right? You can say any kind of lying in the street that gives us a reason why we have to be lazy, why we can't get out and do the work. And yet, 2 Peter chapter 1. You can flip there if you want to, or just listen. 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Says, His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness, through the knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and excellence, by which He has granted to us very precious and great promises, so that through them we may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped from the corruption that is in the world because of sinful desires. 2 Peter 3 and 4. Remember, what did we say? What motivates? Why is the lazy person lazy? Because they want something. And here, the promises of God help us escape the corruption of the world because of sinful desires. The ultimate reason to be able to escape laziness is the gospel of Jesus Christ. His promises to us that He has taken us from death and brought us to newness of life. He has taken us from being slaves of sin to now slaves of righteousness. Sometimes we want just a silver bullet, just to fix our issues, right? And yet that denies the very fact of sanctification, as Philippians chapter 2, verse 13 says, to work out your salvation in fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work. This will require work. But it's not work to make God happy. God's already given you the promises. The work is in response to those promises. Right? So, children help mom with their chores because they find joy in serving their mom instead. Mom is less critical of her speech patterns because she's transformed by it. Singles find benefit in providing free childcare for people because they are blessing them. All kinds of things. Start with the position of the gospel. You do not work to make God happy. Christ has made God happy for you. You work because of that. Because God has already been good to you. But once we start with the gospel, then we add to the truth. You got to work hard. Proverbs 27, verse 23. We're back in Proverbs. Thank you for letting me jump around a little bit. It's always part of these more topical approaches. Proverbs 27, 23. Says, know well the condition of your flocks, and give attention to your herds. For riches do not last forever, and does a crown endure to all generations? He goes on to explain things about it. So basically, the first step is get a knowledge about your life. Know your resources, know your tasks, write them down, and then slowly work on this. Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle. Whatever gathers little by little will increase it. So again, so we take knowledge of what goes on, and then little by little we address things and work on them. Proverbs 13, verse 11. And so 3 R's that Scott Maxwell, who's been a pastor, leadership guru, he gives 3 R's, which are helpful in saying, okay, how do I address, what do I need to work on then? Practically, he says the first one is requirements. Ask yourself, what is required of me? What must I do whether I like it or not? What task, if I neglect it, will cost me? Like, what is the first priority? What do I have to do? For Jared, school and work, right? You gotta get your classes done, or else you're gonna cost you grade-wise. And you gotta get to work, or else you're not gonna get paid. Like, there's requirements. But then the second R is return. What brings the greatest return to others? What can I do better than anyone else? Or what can I do that no one else can? What is going to bring the greatest return to help others? And we have to choose those things. Look at everything that needs to be done and address those things first. And the third are, so we have requirements, return, and then reward. What jobs do we look forward to? What rejuvenate us? What do we thank God that we get to do? Choose things you enjoy. Notice that comes third, not first. We've got to do the things that have to be done first. And then, lastly, once we realize we have to work hard, we have to address that we need to rest hard as well. Because God has created rest for us to enjoy. It's in the days of creation. On the seventh day, the Lord rested. And so in Exodus 20, he's talking about the Ten Commandments. He tells them to keep the Sabbath holy and rest as the Lord rested. And all these good things that we can enjoy that distract us, they are made for our enjoyment. You can just write this passage down, and I'll finish up. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3 and 5. It says, everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, for it is made holy by the word of God and prayer. All those things that distract us, that are pleasures and things, they're good in the right place. And we are to enjoy the rest when we thank God for them. And they're made holy when we go and just say, thank you, God, for the beach, for video games, for whatever, for sitting out on the porch and enjoying a sunset. But rest comes after work, not before it. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 12 and 13 says, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live, also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. That is God's gift to man. We get to eat and drink and take pleasure once we have done the toil. That is God's gift to us.
What verses were those?
That was Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. The truth is, humans are not designed to flourish in a state of constant vacation. That promise is a sham. It's a lie.
It's not even heaven.
It's not even heaven. And in love, Brian Richardson, the pastor, says, in love, God will remove comforts from our lives, which is the essence, trials. When we get overly comfortable with something, we start to sink into spiritual slumber, and then lightning falls from the sky. That comfort is taken away, and we are jolted back to spiritual alertness. Through trials, God says, I love you enough to remove the comforts you crave, to make room for the joy in Christ you need. God is in control. That is our comfort. So when it comes to addressing idleness, when it comes to addressing slothfulness, we have to call it what it is. A sin against the design God has made us. We confess it, and we turn around and instead serve God, even when it comes to the place of taking joy in our rest and relaxation. And when we do all of those things in service to Him, we accomplish what we need to, and we enjoy our rest all the more, right? There's nothing sweeter than a vacation that is the result of hard effort, where you've been serving God and you see it as a great gift to you, rather than guilt or what you should be doing instead. So, we're out of time. As I said again, we'll be talking about the poor next week and trying to address some of those issues and the complexity that exists even in Proverbs regarding that. So, let me pray. If you have any questions afterwards, you can let me know. Gracious God, thank you so much for your truth, for your word, for the fact that you use us. Every single person has been created with tasks. And yet, Lord, we know that so often we are pulled away by comforts, by lies, by fear. And so we ask, Lord, that you would graciously convict us. Draw us to yourself. Help us to see the results of our actions and the pains that we'll accomplish. May we be able to help others as well see the greater joy that comes in serving you. And may we be able to even list out now what's most important, what's most honoring to you, what's most helpful to other people. Give us wisdom, God, to see our own hearts and help others. For the glory of your name.